Let's press forward now and start talking about active reading techniques. So this is getting a little bit more into the nitty-gritty of you've got the book in hand, now what do you do with the book? So I would suggest the first thing you do is try to get a sense of the structure and the overall concept or ideas in the book. Now there's a number of quick ways that you can do this. One of the ways you can do it is to simply just read the table of contents. Zipping through the table of contents will help you out a lot. I keep referencing Karl Popper's Open Society and Its Enemies because it's a book that I've spent a decent bit of time with over the last few weeks and month or so. But in this book, if I open it up, it's called The Open Society and Its Enemies. So automatically you know that he's trying to explain some kind of concepts about society and those who are against that kind of society. Now, when I first picked up the book, obviously I didn't know what he meant by open society, but I understood that he was trying to say that this open society had enemies. So at least that was obvious. But when you grab the book, go straight to the table of contents. And well, you could even start before that with the opening page. So this is called The Open Society and Its Enemies, Volume 1, The Spell of Plato. Interesting. So it looks like this entire book is going to somehow be associated with what Popper is calling an open society, the enemies of that society, so those who must take an opposing view, and then he refers to this first volume as the spell of Plato. So is he saying that Plato has put a spell on people? Is he maybe an enemy? That's a good question. So it automatically gets you a little bit excited about where the book might be going. Now, as you go forward in this particular book, you've got the preface to the first edition, the preface to the second edition. Now we got the table of contents after the acknowledgments. I usually ignore acknowledgments. I find them a little bit tedious. And if I don't know the person who's doing who they're acknowledging, it's sort of a way of saying thanks by the author. So I don't usually read it. Sometimes I might just dip into it to see if I recognize anybody, but otherwise I just keep going. So in the table of contents, we have introduction, we have the spell of Plato, that takes up about 7 pages or so. Then we have the myth of origin and destiny, historicism and the myth of destiny. So now we're realizing, okay, he's going to talk about history. He's got this issue of historicism. Then he talks about Heraclitus in chapter 2, then Plato's theory of forms or ideas. Now, I've always heard of Plato's theories of forms and ideas, so I was intrigued on that in the way that I thought he might explain it somehow and help me understand it better. Never had any idea who Heraclitus was, but he's got that coming before Plato, so it must be preliminary of some kind. And then the next section is called Plato's Descriptive Sociology, Change and Rest, Nature and Convention. The next section is Plato's political program. Now, we all know that Plato wrote a book called The Republic, so he clearly has some sort of political bent that he's trying to get across to his readers. So old Mr. Popper here has a whole section on Plato's political program. Chapter 6 is Totalitarian Justice. Chapter 7 is the Principle of Leadership. Chapter 8 is the Philosopher King. Chapter 9 is Aestheticism, Perfectionism, and Utopianism. Now, again, one of Plato's big ideas that I've heard of a lot is this idea of the philosopher king. So again, it kind of was whetting my appetite a little bit to know what Popper had to say about the philosopher king. And of course, I'm starting to realize that his grand scope of things is about what he's calling historicism and how it somehow relates to Plato casting a spell on people. And then finally, he's got the background of Plato's attack, chapter 10, The Open Society and Its Enemies. Now, if you read just the table of contents, you're not going to understand anything that he's saying in detail, but you're going to get a grip of what the book is about. He's obviously going to critique Plato. So if you have no interest in Plato, or maybe philosophy in general, or historicism, then at this point, you're thinking, well, all I want to know, I'm a political science major, I don't know if this book is even going to help me or anything. I'll tell you right now, the book will help you as a political science major, because if you don't know political science, if you don't know history or political history, you're not going to understand political science today. Now, later on in chapter 2, he's got a whole chapter called Does History Have Any Meaning? So now you begin to see, okay, I've picked up book 2, volume 2, and it picks up exactly where volume 1 left off. And if you go to the table of contents, it starts with chapter 11. So now all of a sudden we realize, oh, this is actually one big book, not just 2 books. And then in volume 2, he goes into Hegel, he goes into Marx, and then he starts asking questions about history itself and how we should really understand it and things like this. So, to get the grand structural clues, you go to the table of contents, you want to read the introduction, and then you want to read the conclusion. So in this case, when we go to the introduction, Popper tells us directly, this book raises issues which may not be apparent from the table of contents. Oh, okay. I just read the table of contents, and now he's telling me there's more to it than that. And then he begins. It sketches some of the difficulties faced by our civilization. It attempts to show that this civilization has not yet fully recovered from the shock of its birth. It attempts to show that the shock of this transition is one of the factors that have made possible the rise of those reactionary movements which have tried and still try to overthrow civilization and to return to tribalism. Exciting stuff. Finally, it suggests that what we call nowadays totalitarianism belongs to a tradition which is just as old or just as young as our civilization itself. And finally, number 5, it further tries to examine the application of the critical and rational methods of science to the problems of the open society. Now, he's given us 5 reasons he's written the book. 5 reasons. So we can write this stuff down and get a good starting point for what he's trying to say in the open society and its enemies. So grab the table of content, read the introduction, and then in this volume 2 now we have the conclusion. So if you're only reading volume 1 of Popper's book, you've only read half the book. Okay, we're starting to realize that because of our peruse through the table of contents. When he gets to the conclusion, he asks the question, has history any meaning? So if you read the introduction to Popper's book and you read the conclusion to Popper's book, you realize what he's trying to say is what's going on with history? How are we to understand it? Is it something we can predict or not predict because we have a particular scientific method in addressing the laws of history? This is what his book is about, and it's a fascinating subject. I thoroughly enjoyed going through his book. Did I agree with everything? That'll be another lesson coming up down the road. So, the idea, get the table of contents, intro and conclusion, read the back of the book. In this one, it's just got bits and pieces on it regarding, it looks like they're quotes from yes, they are. They're quotes from other people's comments about the book. But if you get a book that, this book right here in particular, this is Homage to Catalina by George Orwell. It says on the back that it is considered one of the finest works by a man called the wintry conscious of a generation. And it is one of the top books in the National Review's list. So Homage to Catalina is both George Orwell's memoirs and his experience at the front and his tribute to those who died in what he called a fight for common decency. It's about the Spanish Civil War, and he was an eyewitness to a chunk of it. And so that gives you right there what the book is about. It's dealing with the politics and the functioning and the hands-on, boots on the ground portion of the Spanish Civil War in 1936. And some bits are just laughable. It's not laughable because what he's saying is laughable, but how he's saying what's going on. He's got some funny stuff in here as well. So, yes, read the front of the book, read the back of the book, read the flyleaf. If it's got a dust jacket on it, you can read those bits as well. Then you want to ask yourself the question, what's the main argument of the book? So we can gather that from clues we get out of the table of contents and the introduction and the conclusion. What's the author's purpose? Why did he write the book? As we saw with Popper, he gives us 5 reasons why he wrote the book. And then at that point, you've attacked the book itself and what it's presenting in an absolute nutshell. So then you maybe think, okay, I've got something to go by now. Do I want to read the book, invest my time and energy into it or not? But you could almost call this a kind of x-raying the book. Grab it for what it already has presented to you. It's already got an introduction, it's got a table of contents, it's got a conclusion, it's got a preface or two written by either the author or somebody else. These are things that are giving you clues as to what this book is about to help you understand if you really want to go through and attack it with vigor.